When my tears turn to laughter, that child long ago, my soul starts to linger. It's home, I know. If you catch me daydreaming now and forever, thoughts are carrying me along to that place we call home. Down that long road, throughout life we roam. Whenever I go to that place I know.
It was like periscoping into the future when the Canada Company would name this river the Little Thames. A real estate development company in the 1800s, financed in Britain, they would speculate on opening up a huge chunk of land in southern Ontario, the Huron Tract. Reminded somewhat of home, the members of the company would also, unconsciously perhaps, write a partial scene for the city of today by lending Shakespeare's name to the first inn. Well, as we know, it just went on and on from there. This place has always been at something of an intersection, first the roads and then the railways, and now, well, agriculture, industry, the arts, all cross paths daily, forming an interesting community lifestyle. So let's go backstage in this city of Stratford, and as the bard himself once put it in Twelfth Night, examine those memorials and things of fame that do renown this city. Razzmatazz and all that jazz. Not every day is this easy. But there is a whimsical thread that runs through this place. A thread that, like the river meandering through it, holds the seam between blue-collar and bohemia, technology and expression.
He is a very serpent in my way, and wheresoever this foot of mine doth tread, dost thou understand me?
I didn't realize that Stratford was going to be my home till I kept on being re-engaged and re-engaged and re-engaged here, till it automatically became a home. We bought a house here, but I've never thought of any other place in Canada except Stratford as my home.
That was Butch Blake. Although home ain't the Mississippi, it is warm around here. Colleen Blake.
We have many second-generation people as part of the community. The festival itself is much like a small community within this much larger and supportive community of the city of Stratford. So we have everything from people who are building boots and shoes, people who are making jewelry, milliners, seamstresses. It's a real community that grows exactly in the same way that a city grows.
And the place has grown. Since the 1830s, it has evolved, as Dean Robinson says, into a dual personality community.
You know, if you were designing a coin and you put a picture of a of a steam locomotive on one side of the coin, it's unlikely that you would select a Shakespearean Festival for the other side of the coin. And probably close to 3 times as long as Stratford's been known as a festival city, it was also known as a railway city. Stratford, it just seemed to be a bit of a magnet for railway operations and, you know, to the benefit of the city.
Stratford was known as the classic city because of this kind of feeling that Stratford had a higher level of artisans than most places. And this was especially true because of the 2 large industries at the time, the shops and the furniture trade. In the earlier days, before the 1930s, would have had a very high concentration of artisans and very few manual laborers or unskilled laborers.
From bearings to car seats, carpets to chocolates, their manufacture occupies the skills of over half of the workforce in town today. Like a seed planted in the forest, Stratford was conceived as a focal point for the million-acre Huron tract. Where the road met the river, a trend began. Lutz and Rietstra.
Because of this anticipated influx, the Canada Company started building more inns, and one of these was built by William Sargent. He was responsible for bringing a signboard, which apparently was some kind of bust of Shakespeare or something, and it became known as the Shakespeare Inn. On the first maps of Stratford, Ontario, it says Stratford upon Avon, and there's no doubt about that connection and the fact that that was named on purpose. However, it had an unusual impact on the town later, because when the town was divided into wards in 1858, they were named Romeo, Falstaff. About 15 years later, they started to set up ward schools, which were named after those wards, and therefore the schools are named Romeo, Avon, and so forth.
Here, where communities overlap, the trend is still evolutionary. A case in point, the Bard goes to Hamlet Public School, or Hamlet Public School goes to him. Whichever way, it's a contemporary part of that seamless tradition.
I've heard that some people think that Shakespeare is difficult to act. What do you think?
I think he's a pretty neat person, because once you get into his plays, you start wanting to do them more and more.
That's right.
I thought he was just an ordinary person that was famous and wrote plays.
Well, that's what he was, just an ordinary person. He happened to be a genius, but he was an ordinary person who just did things like you and I.
And perhaps hand the paper a little earlier.
Yeah.
Okay, Gibbon. Yeah, please.
More an anomaly than the ordinary in the acting world, Butch Blake has found a place in the Stratford Festival continuously for 37 seasons.
Alas, I just can't talk about those things.
She has explained your intentions to me, sir.
To my astonishment, this is not something that one aims at. To one's astonishment, I've been in all of Shakespeare's plays, every one of them. Very few of the plays I've done of Shakespeare have I been in only once. Very few.
Difficulties and are ignorant of the detours of conscience.
Yeah, just hold the front. That's great.
For the past 4 decades, Stratford's name has been tied to the developing careers of now well-known performers in the entertainment world. In addition, the name has become internationally synonymous with design, from bijou to wardrobe. Sharing the stage in the economic picture of the city, industry also gives balance to its character. Both sides of the spectrum can trace their origins back to the middle part of the last century, when newly elected as the seat for Perth County, Stratford would cut a deal to lure the iron horse. Coupled to furniture making, the era of the shops and the artisan had arrived. Skills in everything from brass to glass.
In 1870-71 is when the shops came here, and it led to an influx of 300 families. It led to a great boom in housing in Stratford. There was a repeat performance in around 1889, and again the impact on the town was this influx of people. By that point, though, the town was a little bit better able to handle it.
The shops that the Grand Trunk opened, or at least the enlarged shops, they were state-of-the-art repair depot. They had the welders, they had blacksmiths, they had the erecting shop, all of the various trades. The commitment by Grand Trunk to have the repair depot here was significant, and every time Grand Trunk needed more repair facilities, rather than put them in other locations, they simply expanded here.
The mayor had the superintendent, or the proposed superintendent, the person who was checking this spot out, invited them for supper. He became enamored with the daughter, and lo and behold, that's exactly what happened. They got married, and we got the shops. So there's always a good love story attached to everything, I think.
Well, the story goes that the romance with the railway would live for 80 years before it grew cold. The city of 28,000 today, while remembering what was, has trumpeted in a new cast, bringing with it innovative ideas.
Hello, everybody. My name is June. What's yours?
A barrel of tar. This is a remarkable community to live in for young people because the theater is here. There's a teacher here in town who teaches grade 2, Lois Burdett, and she works with 7-year-olds and exposes them to Shakespeare. Their love of Shakespeare filters through for the rest of their lives.
This morning, when I got out of bed, I tripped on a feather, I slid down the stairs, and I landed on my tush. I could tell it was going to be a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day.
Stratford's bad day would happen in the middle of this century. The Stratford Concert Band, which had its beginnings as the Grand Trunk and then later as the CNR Band, is one of the few living reminders of the city's rail era. When the age of steam petered out, diesel played the last dance for the shops.
Stratford certainly appreciated the railway and what the railway was doing, and the commitment that the railway had made to the city in this huge expansion, and I think felt pretty smug and secure about their future, the town's future as a railway town, or at least a town as close to being a railway town as you could get. When the announcement came in the 50s that the shops were going to close, it was pretty devastating. When you go through all the tough times and things seemingly are okay, and then like a bolt from the blue, the word comes down that things are going to change. It was pretty traumatic.
The motif that connected Stratford from the beginning with William Shakespeare would, throughout its history, continue to develop backstage, until finally, these connections would light the way through a blackened night.
The railway, although it preceded the Stratford Festival by a long shot here in Stratford, maybe brought with it some Shakespearean ties. Ahead of the festival. There was a superintendent of the shops back before the turn of the century by the name of John Barrett.
And he had probably the largest collection of Shakespeareana in North America. Just a huge library. It actually caused his house on Durrow Street to sink a number of inches because he had so many books.
Here was a guy who had no way of knowing that Stratford one day would become, Stratford, Ontario would ever become famous for its Stratford Festival, and yet he had a Shakespearean collection that was probably second to none.
The final curtain for Stratford, the railway city, came in 1951 when CNR shut down the shops. With 2,000 workers headed for the breadline, a Stratford journalist, Tom Patterson, pitched a scheme to the city to capitalize on its romance with the bard.
Shakespeare Festival with the best talent available. I'd like to ask council's support in investigating the possibilities of it. Thank you.
And they went for it. Richard III and All's Well That Ends Well played the opening run.
I mean, in a small town in southwestern Ontario, a town of 25,000 people that was really known as a railway town, no question, to undertake this kind of thing in 1953 when communication and travel was much more difficult than it is now, was remarkable. And it took a lot of very adventurous souls to go with it.
So the first thing they ventured out into was the tent, this magnificent tent which was one of the finest things you could have to start a venture like that. It was romantic, it was exciting, it had the excitement of a circus. People came in and dared the elements to come in when it rained, but it was exciting to be in that.
Well, the spirit of the community was remarkable. So everyone pitched in to try and support all of the audience members that were coming from all over the world to see this theater. And I think they were incredibly proud of it. There are many, many people who live in Stratford who had never been inside a theater in their lives at that point. I mean, didn't know anything about live theater. And inevitably, there was a tremendous amount of skepticism and concern about putting all your eggs in one basket and that sort of thing. But I think that as they saw people come and go over the next few years, it became a real source of pride for the community and a newly directed energy for the community to have the Stratford Festival here.
But I'm sure that the festival was an odd duck in this railway town, even though we had Shakespearean, or streets named after Shakespeare and schools named after with Shakespearean names. Most of the railway people at that time were more concerned about where they were going to next find work, to worry about what was going on the hill down by the Avon River.
New opportunities, some within the workings of the festival, others in diverse industries to locate here, became the safety net for the displaced workforce of the 1950s. The many parts that make up this place play out day to day.
As the festival became established and the reality of the railway closing the shops sunk in, I think there gradually grew an acceptance. And now I think you'll find that the people who were sort of hardcore railway workers and whose families had long lived by the checks of the railway are equally as proud that we have a Shakespearean festival in the city.
Oh, infinite virtue, comest thou smiling from the world's great snare uncaught?
It has a remarkable history, the Stratford Festival, and a great many people who started in 1953 are still around and still part of the community, and sons and daughters of those people are working at the festival now.
He quickly drew his sword so thin and thrust it deeply into his skin. I'm dying!
I am never so, I never enjoy things so much as to see young, tiny kids like that come out with the expressions and the ideas of what Shakespeare is all about.
Then he fell to the ground and he cried, I'm dead!
And to have someone like Lois here do what she does is unbelievable. It's another miracle of this place, that there's someone there who takes the trouble to make it a great joy to know all about Shakespeare and to understand it and express it in their own words, something one is never given the chance to do normally. Now suddenly, if you know, as we're all here, if Shakespeare walked into this room, what would be your reaction? What would you think? What would you do?
I'd welcome him to stay and to see our play, because so he could see what we were doing.
That's right. I think he would appreciate that. What would you do, Jeremiah, if he walked into the room?
You really want to know?
Yes, of course.
I would faint.
Yes, so would I. So would I.
When you talk about the character of Stratford, you can't ignore the role that the railway played here. You can't now ignore the role that the festival is playing here. But when you look at what transpired and how the railway faded and the festival blossomed, and the trauma that sort of swept the city in the 50s when the shops were closing, I think what it did more than anything else for the community in retrospect was add some resilience. It was a lesson that the closing of the shops sort of brought to fruition, and I think the city took the lesson and learned from it, and is probably a much stronger community because of it.
I think quite a few people thought it was going to be a white elephant. But thank God, it's gone on and on and on. We've had the right kind of directors, all brilliant people to steer this theatre into what it is now, which is just wonderful.
Stratford has changed its kind of base of its economy, but at the same time, most of the people are involved still in the factory work in that. But the festival actually has that kind of artisan working in the stages and the dressmaking and stuff like that. So in some ways, there's that continuation of the type of town Stratford is.
We've introduced a family experience now that really tries to eliminate that feeling, that sense that you have to be doing something completely different if you come to theater. Theater really should be part of our everyday lives and just another experience, another enriching and artistic experience that helps us reflect our own society in what we see on stage.
Theater mirroring life. Like a three-act play, the community carved from the bush becomes the crossroad of ideas, of ideals, and goes on to be a place where things intersecting spin renewal. The story of a city, the city of Stratford, our own Stratford-on-Avon.
To that place we call home. Down that long road, throughout life we